how throat voices work. And how do we talk about these activations from the perspective of integrating it into our knowledge base so that we can synthesize Keynote Weave in a much better way? Now, when it comes to communication issues, all I want you to think about it as, instead of thinking something wrong with me, something wrong with you, there's just a simple incompatibility in either communication style or interactivity. And of course, we always have people operating in not self. So it's not about anything wrong. It's just that there's specificities to how people operate. Now, when you're understanding human design, anytime you look at the gate activation, either dormant or functional, these fixed gates, that is something that they have a genetic need for some kind of expression or experience. So when you're looking carefully at your throat, remember, look down at your throat, you're going to see those are your own voices that you must hear because it's unique to you. And so if you want to honor somebody else's, let's say, need for communication, what I do is I personally sense into how I'm feeling as I'm taking in their frequency, and I link up to what I hear them say that I can identify in the chart. That's how my mind likes to play with the material. And then you see me when people are talking, I will highlight, I will put my cursor over a keynote that I recognize. That's just my way of being active while I'm listening to somebody else. So you might have your own way. But when you're listening to your client, remember, there are expression mechanisms in the throat, as well as in the heart center. We have our ends of the streams of instinct and sensitivity or touch. We have the 26 and the 40. So those are also expression mechanisms. So we're looking at the throat today. See how each of these centers are connected up to the throat that are going to allow for some kind of communication. In a 9-centered human being, it's all about communion. Each of us, when we awaken, we can offer our unique, differentiated perspective to an other without a not-self agenda. When that happens, we're being an outer authority. We're being or coming from a place of enlightenment. And so rather than your mind getting all caught up in the story that you are telling yourself about good, bad, right, wrong, if you can come back to present moment and listen for pure, clean, clear communication, feel how it resonates in your body. Either these gates or channels in somebody's design are designed to be, in Natalie's case, what is impactful? In my case, what is successful? In Efrat's case, what is satisfying? In Lisa's case, what is surprising? So from the perspective of each of us finding our signature, do not forget that when you're looking at a design, you have to put them back into their context. The biggest context is type and the signature of being aligned. The success, sweet, satisfying, peaceful, surprising, whatever the case may be for that type. That's how you keynote weave. Right there is the basic, most simplest, fundamental place to go. Okay. Now this throat is so complex in that it's got all these different roads, you could say. Quite literally, they're all black right here. If they were red, they'd be tunnels and we'd be unaware until it pops out. So from the perspective of learning about how to be an analyst, to put my little 2 cents into what everyone was saying this morning, one of the things that you're going to notice is that when you start to do this work is that you as a personality may not know what you're talking about, but you as an unconscious reality, your body, your physicality communicating knows so much more than what the personality thinks it knows. So the moment that you are allowed to get yourself out of the way by just trusting your voice, okay, if you have a defined voice, or if you have an undefined throat, trusting whatever your authoritative process is in order to ask the right question, in order to say that quote unquote right thing. It's about alignment, really it is. It's about correctness. So manifestation happens here in the throat center because of a consistent connectivity to energy that is either directly or indirectly, as in Natalie's case, reaching the throat. That's where we have manifestation. That's where we have the consistency of the verbal capacity. So remember, if you're an undefined throat analyst, you'll still be a great analyst. You just won't say as many things. You'll be more conversational. Okay, just like us with our basic splits over here, we are much more conversational in integrating with another person. So trusting yourself is the most important thing I can tell you about doing this work. This hub of manifestation, if it's undefined in you, is an area of wisdom potential where you can guide others' manifestation because you have that recognition capacity or response or whatever the case may be. So looking at all of these throat gates, when you're dealing with this most complex of all centers, notice how it's all through the quarter of civilization. So what you're looking at in one quarter of this wheel, everything about the throat is a civilizing effect on human beings. Yeah, civilizing. Why? Communication helps us get our differences out of the way, because when we have communion, when we have clear communication, we are less likely to feel frustrated, angry, bitter, or disappointed. When you come into your mind space and you see that whatever you're believing or hearing or thinking inside of your head about yourself is making you bitter, angry, frustrated, or disappointed, please immediately question that thought. I'm pausing because I really want that to sink in. What is real in the world of form, in communicative reality, is that when you speak inauthentically, it shows. Show of hands. When somebody is saying something that they don't believe in, can you feel it? Can you see it? Can you recognize it? When they're being inauthentic with their voice, they're promising something, they're trying to say something in order to attract attention or prove something. Can you feel it? Can you see it? Can you hear it? Smell it? Taste it? Touch it? It's apparent, right? There's no place to hide when you open your mouth and you're coming from, see me, value me, appreciate my identity, whatever the case may be. Okay, you can lower your hands. Okay, so what I want you to see is that when we speak, there's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide. You can feel it. Well, I keep saying feel. That's my perspective as far as my unconscious process of what I sense, my sensory capacity, but it's really all of the senses. So maintaining our form on this planet is what those throat gates are about. Either a communicative principle, okay, all of the throat gates up to the head, these are all communication only. These are not action gates. Where do we find action gates? From the perspective of direct action gates, primary action gates. Please give me some numbers. Direct action gates, primary action gates. Okay. There's one more. Oh, there we go. So 45, 12 is one missing, 35, and 20, right? Because from the perspective of the gate itself, that is expressing the action, the energy, directly. There are only 1, 2, 3, 4 that are pointing at energy functions, right? Energy centers. So those are the things that are direct manifestation gates. So as an example, now remember when you're looking at this, this is all about thyroid. What is thyroid about? It's like a regulatory principle, you know, our ability to manifest in this form, on this planet. Everybody has the capacity to manifest, but nobody has the capacity to initiate that unless they're manifested in design. And of course, even in that case, these emotional manifestors need to wait for clarity. These manifested energies need to have the permission to take control or take charge. And this last one, this one has to wait for the response. So you can see all of these are primarily action, but through a correct interaction. And now when you look at all these 11 gates, every single one of them being connected up to the same biological function, thyroid, parathyroid. It's not like the heart where there's all these different things going on. It's just thyroid. We can call that unity. Unity of a single biological association where we're looking at the thyroid, and what it manifests as is the throat. So the voice, the one way in which language comes out of all of us, each of us having our own articulatory skills. So every single one of these gates, I want you to think articulation. Okay, articulation. They all have an articulatory skillfulness or ability to encourage progress or ability to change the way the entire world sees something. 12s. They all have something unique. They are not all alike. And how do we find their uniqueness? Not just through knowing a gate, but what stream is it in? What is it pointing at from the perspective of what center is actually being given that voice? Because the center itself is speaking when it's connected up, yeah, consistently. That's that person's definition. The royal we, you know? So, from the perspective of how language is coming out of us, when you look at a body graph, look at what's going on up here from the perspective of the voice in relationship to mind. Only 3 of all of those gates really have the ability to translate light into sound or vibrational word formulas from the perspective of just this pure, clean, self-reflected consciousness. Okay, these are metamorphic gates. That's the first thing to come to grips with. They're all only talking about mind. Now, when you're talking about mind, remember you have those 3 that are either going to be logical in their assumptions, we can say, if it's open up there. They're going to be abstract, or they're going to be individual. So if you compare the 3, we know that there's 2 parts collective and 1 part individual. So it's not about tribe. Up here, it's just about the world at large for the most part, and then there are the freaks among us that have some activations or channels within. And so timing is everything when it comes to mental communication. Everything. If you're feeling uncertain, why not just say pass? If you're feeling pressured and mentally anxious, why not just let that go? Because you don't have to have any kind of certainty out of your mental capacity to articulate. You don't. So stop trying to be that certain, sure, inspirational orator. You don't have to. Let it go. Okay? From the perspective of these 11 throat gates, each one of them have a unique voice. So the thing to understand is your genetic potential shows us where your true voice comes from. So it's very important to understand where your voice comes from, where your words come from, because they don't just come from mind. This is what Ra has said to us, okay? Anyone. So just like you are here studying not only for yourself, but also for others, what you can do from this day moving forward, if you want to study the throat, is listen for the keynotes of those throat gates coming out of your friends' mouths. Your family, your kids, your study buddies, whoever it happens to be, just listen. And then you can see, are they speaking from an authentic voice? Or are they speaking from conditioning? I don't want to say inauthentic, because some conditioning is absolutely authentic. Those of you in your Chiron cycle, you know, or whatever cycle, long-term cycle that really is a part of, let's say, the life work that you're moving through at that time of your life, you know, from the perspective of you don't want to use those to make decisions because they're not unique to you. However, they are part of the wisdom potential that can flow from you when you are operating in alignment, because there are no rules for the nine-centered being. Your voice is what you have to bridge the gap between you and another, just like right now. It's funny, happenstance. I happen to be not on camera. But right now, all you're hearing is my voice. My entire auric frequency is being communicated through this voice. And so from the perspective of understanding communication, it's not just about the words that we use. The quality of the voice is the most important thing. Our words that we actually use are secondary, according to Ra. It is the quality of the voice that makes a difference as far as whether or not the information, the energy is flowing from this individual and into another. Now, that's just part of the story. When we connect up with others, certain people will resonate. You know, certain people will vibrate and really grasp that or get it in their cells, deep in their cells. You may not know what to think about it yet, but you know that you cannot help but listen because something is happening inside of you. That's the mutative effect of any of these gates that are individual in nature. Mutative effects. So the gates in your throat are key to who you are. It's something that not only you need to speak, but you also need to hear for yourself. Hear your own voice. And then know what aspects are coming through, bleed through from the nighttime conditioning potentially. Love and light. You've got the 62 at night. You don't have it during the day. Love and light. I only want rainbows and unicorn farts and everything's wonderful. You know, if your mind is telling you, no, but we have to figure out what we think here. See, I'm just making that little false voice to kind of differentiate it from my normal speaking voice. That's the inauthenticity. I'm playing with that, but that is what happens. Your voice sounds different. This is very true when it comes to an undefined throat. Anybody ever remember listening to, what's his name? He just died. Human Design Hawaii. John. Yeah, John. Do you recall how often he would laugh and also say all kinds of weird things in very different tonalities? Unicorn farts, that's the 62, John. That's an official key term. Just kidding. Just kidding. Please don't say that. It's not true. But when you study Dream Rave, you'll start to learn why I said that. It's an angel realm gate. And if it's a nighttime bleed through conditioning, oh boy, does it get you into trouble during the daytime. Okay. So yes, his voice. So your voice, when it's undefined, it's inconsistent. It's all over the map. You have different ranges of tonality. Think Celine Dion. Celine Dion. Yeah? Isn't she incredible? Her voice. Wow. Okay. So from the perspective of these voices, all of you have these voices. They're either going to be consistent, reliable, trustworthy aspects of your nature, or they're going to be inconsistent and subject to showing up in a conditioned way. Nothing wrong with either of that. All of this is beautiful and perfect. We all have a place within our totality. So these are the keys that we're going to go through one at a time. I'm going to give you a break in about 5 minutes. And when we come back, I'm going to go through all of them as an overview or review if you've already done this. And if you want to go deeper, 4 or 5 different classes, I believe, in the IHDS class that I'll be doing soon. So we're going to start off with looking at the gates that are pointed up at the Ajna center. When you think about these gates, just know that they are incredibly unusual from the sense of they are metamorphic. Metamorphic. What does that mean? Morphic. They change. Meta. They have meta capacity. To be very simple about it. They are more than just receptors of mental opinions, insights, or ideas, of mental concepts. They are the translators. So besides metamorphic, think translators of taking mental concepts and distilling them down into language. So stepping down in frequency. Light is a higher frequency, right? Then we have sound. I don't know the order of such things or all of the different densities, but I do know that light travels faster, right? And then we have sound. So here's the sound. Here's where it happens. So language is actually, according to Ra, not in Ashna. Language emerges out of the throat. So from the perspective of each of these gates, there is going to be a frequency of this or that to the way in which this I think voice shows up. It's either reasonable or unreasonable. The I know, insist, or I don't know, desist. The I believe, instilling hope, or faith is another word you can use there, or despair. So from the perspective of language and turning light into sound, these metamorphic gates in you are true to your aspect of what you came here for. If you have a planet sitting there, that planet, teaching, if it's Jupiter, your good fortune and your good luck, if it's Jupiter. So that's where we have our ingredients, in our cake that we're baking. What do we need we need in order for the flour or the cake to rise? We need our baking soda, and we need our apple cider vinegar. We need our aspects of what we're bringing to the table. Yeah, we're not going to do a lot of chart analysis like comprehensively. I just have a couple of little examples in here. And I'll label the names if you feel like maybe you know them or you can relate or correlate. This is one of the things that you want to do from the perspective of from this day forward. Look, listen, hear for those voices. Everybody has them. Everybody can get conditioned to use them. But for most people, it's not a place of authority to listen to them out loud. From the perspective of mental or projectors and ego, authority manifestors, or the perspective of self-projected projectors, hearing what you hear yourself say, like really following what you hear yourself say, either spontaneously, the ego and the self-projected, or when you come to your certainty with the mental projector. Those are the only people that can really use what they hear themselves say as part of their decision-making process. Everybody else has a different process. For Lisa, she has her own knowing that happens through her lunar cycle. After the lunar cycle, we have that sense of knowing for the reflector. And everybody else, you have a physical place in your body for your authority to happen. So the throat is never a place of authority, period. What you hear yourself say, let's say as an example, your mind says, I know, and I'm going to do it. And then because you don't want to be seen as mentally inconsistent, you think that you have to do what you said you were going to do. It's a real falsity in today's day and age that you believe the mind's story when in reality, it really is just like Rob would say, gas of the brain. Okay, so let's go into being unreasonable or being reasonable, the I think process. In terms of looking at the 60-second gate, this is the logical process, a voice that says, I think, or I don't think. I don't think it's okay. I think it's reasonable. I think it's unreasonable. It's thinking. That is the logical key. So from the perspective of what keynotes you can use, think or not, I don't think. From the perspective of what you add on to at this level, this may be the thing that you have not yet heard is reasonable with one's, what are they going to be expressing? Opinions, right? On the flow of energy, 17 opinions, or unreasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable to, so you can hear that in people's language, what they use. From the perspective of who this is Yoko Ono's chart. And she says, I think energy is the most important thing that we can give to people as performers. Anything else is a little bit pretentious, but energy is not. You can see that she has this in Pluto as part of her caution, patience, and detail, producing excellence out of limitation. Now, The next one we're looking at is the I know voice. So we all know Ra knows. You know? Do you know? So over here, we're dealing with out of the collective into the individual. Ooh, I like that, Natalie. Energy. Yeah. Energy. For sure. From the perspective of the individual saying, I know, or not, the whole thing about this is that it's insistent. You can hear when Ra insists that he knows. You can tell that man is certain about his formulas. When you hear him say, I think, you hear the frequency shift. Have you noticed? The I know, the articulatory insistence of certainty is different than the I think voice, yeah? Anybody saying I think is different than I know or I don't know, From the perspective of, it's like a question. These are freaks, as we know. So as a freak, we can desist in order that we don't offend anybody. Desist, as in we don't want to be picked on, we don't want to be ostracated, we're all very different, we're freaks. I say we because I'm part of that group and I've got a 23. So from the perspective of it's a mask that we wear, but with our voice. And none of us compare. We all have different voices. So from the perspective of what you see in the quality to how the voice is being used, it depends on what is actually defined there in our individual process. Here with Ra, he says, I've said, I know so much in my life. I tell you it's weird. I know. It comes out when I don't even know what I'm saying I know to. Because it is just a program. I know. Right there. See how he says, I don't even know what I'm saying I know to. The I here is his mind. His body, this was his design path that he was walking, had this genetic imprinting that gave him that freak channel that could be certain about the formulas that he was sharing through his I think process. So from the perspective of the last of the metamorphic gates, I kept meaning to try and get rid of all the Getty images, which is another reason why I'm redoing that presentation. Okay. From the perspective of what we're looking at, presenter view, there we go. Part of the abstract process here is the expression gate that says, I believe. Now, have you ever noticed in the believe word, the word lie is right there? It's so different from facts. Although facts can lie too, because it depends on the question that you're asking in order to get to that answer, in order to get to that opinion, in order to share that fact. So just letting you know, this is not about right or wrong, good or bad. It just is what it is. The abstract process tends to illustrate the story with bigger and bigger fish, right? I believe it was about this big. And you can hear people say, well, I believe. Or if they have the whole channel, they say, I'm curious. What do you believe? So from the quality of what it shows up like, if hope is something that conflicts with what that person's design is, let's say they're a 56 and their color is a 5, we know that that's about guilt. I might not use the term hope there personally. I might use faith because that's another word that Rob would use. But you get the gist of the frequency from this up and down. Why is it up and down? Abstract in nature. Is going to be about emotionality. One of the most emotional experiences of mental definition is that stream right there of sensing, mental sensing. So part of the abstract process is to have this voice, this quality of a wave over here, even though it's not connected directly to the emotional center. We're looking at somebody who has a frequency of up and down. So hope and despair is the word you can use. That solar plexus wave pattern rises up on hope only to crash down in despair. And that happens with your mind. All of these gates up here, that happens with your mind. So the voice that expresses here gives a spiritual upliftment. That's why faith. Parables, revelations, it's kind of linked to this trait gate of revelation. It can give you hope for a better future based on what we've learned from the past. How can we stimulate people with stories in order that they don't repeat the same mistakes from the past? That's why we have all these parables and fables and children's stories that teach them, to have a different mindset or behavior when it comes to treating people. In order that humanity gets along, we have stories. The Wanderer. You can see this is Victoria Beckham. What she says is, I want my kids to have a good work ethic. I believe you can achieve anything if you work hard enough to get it. There's her wisdom potential, the love of work. She is here to work. But if she imprints that on her kids who are not here to work, oh, darn. That's why treat everybody uniquely. From the perspective of what it's in her life's work, her earth. Stability through movement. Okay. Now there are throat gates that are open to the emotional system. This is a very different story from the perspective of open to the mind, the mental capacity. Now we're looking at manifested gates. So when you have a throat gate that's open to the manifestation of energy and emotionality, there's a huge impact of this voice. Okay? This voice has a huge impact. Anybody ever experience somebody, a manifestor who's angry, who has one of these channels? Ouch. Huge impact. When they're initiating from anger, there's so much more anger created in the world because of it. When they're coming from a place of peace, they're initiating their impact, they're informing of their peace, and they initiate more of the same. So when these voices are connected to the solar plexus, again, I'm talking about manifestors, so no sacral voice, we're looking at each of these, of course, having a binary. Just like we had with the others, there's going to be a binary. And it's going to be different because these are totally different streams, totally different frequencies, totally different realities, if I could put it that way. Somebody living in the emotional world is somebody very different than living in the abstract world. So from the perspective of the abstract process, encouraging or discouraging is the way that this person will feel or be able to encourage or discourage progress or change. I feel like a new experience. I'm bored. I feel like a change. I feel like I want to do something different. Okay, feeling. Remember what this channel is part of? Transitoriness. Design of a jack of all trades. What are transitory but feelings? Feelings are very transitory. Okay, that's how we can remember. Know what else is transitory? Experiences. Lavina really wants to joke about orgasms, but I'll just stop right there. So from the perspective of this voice, the important voice of expressing the encouragement or discouragement of making progress or having a new experience, this is a vital genetic key to this person's reality. What's going to bring them into a new experience? Or can they share their feeling or their experience in order to encourage or discourage experience? Because, hey, when you're abstract, you learn from experience, period. If any of you have strong abstract in your design, you're only going to learn from experience, period. It's like a 3. You only learn from the trial and error, the school of the hard knocks, as a 3, period. That's what we do. Okay? So the job description of this 35 is to either encourage or discourage feeling, experiences, progress. And you could even say change. Here's Bob Dylan. He says, when you feel in your gut what you are and then dynamically pursue it, don't back down and don't give up. Then you're going to mystify a lot of folks. This is Venus Second line, creative block. By design, progress cannot exist in a vacuum as it's dependent on interaction. Progress, the gate of change. So from the perspective of this next one, part of the individual process, we have I act with either caution or abandon. I act or I know I can try is another way that shows up. I know shows up in individuality because it's part of the knowing circuitry. Okay? I can try because I might be able to act with caution or act with abandon. So basically, this is another I know, because the I know is always in individuality when it comes from the knowing circuitry. Acting with caution or acting with abandon. This is the most deeply mutative expressive gate that we have because it's one of the mutative voices that is able to be the representative of the social potential of individuals to be able to mutate others. So they have great articulatory skills, incredible. Why? It's a manifested expression of the power of passion. Do you remember where it goes? What are we looking for here? This knowing of expressing the spirit in life. The 12 has this lyrical quality. If you've ever listened to Ra and you hear him start to speak in either rhyme when he's doing his poetry or riddles or, you know, anything that's makes you kind of think like a Zen koan. You know what those are? It's like, oh, wait, something's happening. I can feel it. I can feel it in my body. Mutative potential. This manifester strength or channel has the ability to change the way the entire world sees things. The entire world, the collective world, because it has that kind of mutative power and effect. So much of this is caution or abandon. It's about knowing when to act or not. We either know or we don't know. We're social or we're not, right? Because this is an off-on pulse when we're looking at individuality. Underlying caution or acting with abandon. And that leads, potentially, if the abandon is there, we can say it leads them into all kinds of emotional dilemmas. Why? If you're manifesting, acting with abandon, and maybe you're not clear on the wave, we're initiating some new thing into the world that triggers other people on a deep emotional and even psychological level, because we know a lot of those, all of them except for one, are about the mind from the perspective of the expression of the solar plexus, where they are in the body graph. And here's the world of form. So this channel of openness, this is actually Gwen Stefani's chart. There are other incredible singers. Adele, I believe, has this chart. Here I always said believe because I don't know. If I'm remembering correctly, I'm pretty sure she has that. So the channel of openness, design of a social being. She says, I try not to be, but I'm super neurotic about diet. I'm neurotic about trying not to be neurotic. I'm like every other girl. I have to try really hard my whole life to try to be fit. And I'm super vain. And I want to wear cute clothes. Oh, can you hear the struggles of having that 39 pointed at the 55? Almost the entire stream. Yeah. Her Mercury, the second line, purification. Her North Node, fifth line, directness, as part of her social or antisocial expression of her nature, being, openness. Now, as we move past the solar plexus, we are now entering the realm, the domain of something really weird in the body graph. This is actually, it says part of the tribal process, but it's not really necessarily tribal in and of itself. This is the only pure OC16 channel, organizing channels of a group of 16 that is designed to be at the helm of all humanity. So you hear this sense of entitlement that 45s have. The 45 says, I have or I don't have, and it's possessive or it's not. This voice is we have to, we must, we should, promise and prove. So the 45th gate can be very dominant, or on the flip side, it can be non-possessive. It's a dominant gate, the queen, king, ruler, emperor, empress, pasha, by nature. So if they are too demanding, you have to, you must, you should, off with their head. People don't want to follow that kind of ruler anymore. People don't want to be told what to do. So here's why. When you see, take a look. I'm going to close this thing. I don't like it over there. Okay, that was just my little toolbar. Oh, it's locked. Okay, getting rid of the toolbar. What you're looking at here is, see how we have logic, we have abstract, we have individuality, and we have this one voice of the tribe. So what is predominantly true about humanity is there's a lot of individuals, and there's some logical collective people, and there's some logical abstract people that are experiential or experimental or individual. But this predominant frequency in the throat, there's only one voice that says have. So when you're looking at the ego circuitry, see the ego circuitry? Okay, ego circuitry, this is the focus here in the tribe as far as the expression of this voice that says we have. So you're looking at 1, 2 feeds into this one channel. Whereas when we look at those other aspects, okay, remember we have feeds, if you will, into the throat. Here, this is only coming, the 35 is only coming from 41, 30, and 36. And then we have the 35. Same thing on the other side because they're mirrors, right? Here we have a lot of other stuff going on, individuality, flow. In a large group, everything flows into that 45. That's why it's so dominant in the large group. It is designed to have it say so. And when it's not given that, so much anger, so much challenge or problem because this person is trying to do what they came here for and yet they can't. They don't have the ability, the freedom. They're not operating in alignment. They don't have their people. And it's a big problem. Now, from the perspective of quote from Ra, direct quote, 4521 isn't really a part of tribal circuitry. Though I know you were formally taught that because, obviously, it becomes the expression of the tribe. Okay, you can easily see that. When he was given the knowledge, 4521 was something that was established as something truly separate because it is the one channel that rules all of the large groupings of our societal structures, all of them, from 10 people and beyond, as far as the sizings of groups. So it's separate. In ordinary human design knowledge, you will not find this. Okay, it's still tribal in nature, frequency. It's about ownership and rulership and haves and have-nots. So this is significant is in when you go to the level of Wa studies, if you go to sociology or OC16, it's understood in business analysis as the channel that is the thematic of large organized groups, which is there are no ends to hierarchies in large groupings of human beings. Okay, so there's what a Wa or the OC16 structure looks like when you put people together. This is the one ring to rule them all at the top. So here's the stream of instinct that has an expression gate. The egoist, remember it's a control mechanism when we were studying our memory circuitry. 26 gives us the will or not to apply energy, to control memory. The stream of sensitivity, see how it says mechanic? They're mechanics of expression. The 40 is aloneness, the will or lack of will to provide for our needy. So that's another reason why you can see all of this energy, all of these people, all of this profound humanity feeding into that one ring to rule them all. That's why they are entitled. They say, I have to. I have my own high standards for what I want in a partner and how I want to be treated. I bring a lot to the table. Hear the ego. I'm not talking about material things, but what I have to offer as a person. Love and loyalty and all the things that make a good relationship. Well, we have a basic split here. We do see she's learning about love in this lifetime. Absolutely. Basic splits, learning about collaboration and partnership, designed for partnership. Look at those beautiful Venuses. And when you see Venus defined in a channel, oh, isn't she gorgeous? I mean, you know, depending on your tastes, of course, but there's no denying she has a very beautiful countenance. And that is what tends to happen when you've got a defined Venus there. Jennifer Affleck. If she's still married, did they stop being married? I can't remember. Let me check here. Would the 45 voice also be considered manifested like 12 and 35? Anyone else who wants to answer? Is it one of the primary gates of action? What is the definition of manifested? Yes. So what is the definition of manifested? Connected to a motor, exactly. So it's only manifested if it's connected to a motor. Okay? So either directly or indirectly connected to a motor. Then it would be manifested. A figurehead, if it doesn't have the manifestation, has a lot less power than an energy dynamic like hers, where she has the reliable, trustworthy, intrinsic own sense of self-worth and value permanently hooked to express her manifestation. So her design is generative with ego manifestation. Yeah, power to the throat. So I'm not sure if you meant, Nina, whether this chart was manifested or just the 45 in general. Did that answer the question?
Yes, because I was taking notes compared to the other voices, and I was just looking to verify what I knew already because you hadn't said it. So yes, you answered the question with about 45. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. So this one is yes, manifested, but only in response will it be satisfying to take control of her lover or whatever the case may be. Okay. So 33. I remember. We have I remember or I don't remember. It's the third member of our abstract, this voice of I remember. So from the perspective of the abstract process, we see I remember this experience or this inexperience. So this voice of having the secret or not having the secret, holding the secret, having that revelation. Remember, retreat. Yeah, in order to process. So it's about assessing experience or inexperience. That's what Naraya and Natalie are doing in class. They're assessing your experience. They're sharing their experience. The remembrance is part of the end of our stream that gives us this awareness principle through vocal expression. Now, it's not directly connected to awareness, as you can see. But once we've processed our process of experience, we retreat, we have our own take on things, our time, our digestion process, all abstract is experiential in nature. So assessing experience, are they experienced or are they inexperienced? I have a 33 as well. We know what it feels like to be inexperienced. We remember it. We remember going through the trials and tribulations of having to learn all of this information and doing our best as we step through the process of becoming certified and then actually doing the work. So remember that the 35 is about experiential, like the actual experience itself, through its relationship with others, whereas 33 is reflective in nature. It's looking back on the experience where we had phenomena. You know, people are sharing their stories with us. It happens. from the perspective of, why is this stranger just telling me their life story? It happens in classes and sessions with people. So you're looking at, from the perspective of the past, abstract is always about past, what happened? This is how I experienced this, whatever it is. So the voice that you're hearing when we say, I remember, this is what we really truly remember. And remember, our memory is flawed. So from the perspective of every time you call up a memory, you're going to have a different experience. Why? Because you're processing it in a different time, place, or moment, and you have more data. Every time you return to that memory and you experience it, it changes somewhat in your brain. So the thing that really traumatized me in the beginning of not being able to know the answer and, looking stupid in front of my classmates because I asked a question that, we should have known. You should have known this, Lavina. Doesn't bother me as much anymore. I can say, I don't know. I don't remember. Somebody help me. And I have brain farts and it's all okay. From the perspective of, must have farts on the brain. That was the third time I said that this class. Apologies for those of you who are sensitive to that. Here is Justin Timberlake. The values my mother taught me were like, if you're going to do something, don't half-ass it. I remember her literally saying that to me. Like the first time I ever heard the term half-ass was coming from my mother's lips. I was probably 8 or 9. If you're going to do something, go ahead and throw 115% at it. And if you get 100% back, well, there you go. You're perfect. That's his take on things. So you can see it's the design of a witness. We have the south node, third line pessimism, and you've got his earth, fifth line timing, and the north node, fourth line dignity, as part of his prodigal son strength that we have there. Okay. From the perspective of sharing many stories, exactly. Yes, that's why we share stories, because stories illustrate so much. If you're strongly abstract, telling the story gets the experience across. Like putting language into an experience, like Naraya came up with the baking of the cake, or Natalie came up with the soup that you're cooking, or Nina, you mentioned riding bikes, Sometimes we just got to get on the bike, and sometimes we don't feel like riding the bike, and it's all okay. Okay, so if we look at these 3 abstracts together, I am going to show you something you can do with your designs. Ready? Check it out. If you have all these 3 gates, you have the hope to encourage experience, or the experience to encourage hope. You have the despair that can discourage inexperience. You have inexperience that is discouraged by despair. That's just keynoting. Okay? Whatever the case may be, you can weave these in however it is that you wish. Did that make sense? Did I pass that too quickly? We can say it in many different ways. Check. Poetry. Yes, the poetry of keynoting. I used to do this study group a long time ago when I became an analyst. The poetry of keynoting. It just brought people together, had them practice and play, along with myself. Just playing with the poetry of keynoting. There's no wrong, There's just pinging the keynotes of what it is that you're seeing. And because you're using the keynotes, it sinks into somebody at a very deep level. Okay, if we're looking at this particular gate, I can. My mind goes, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. But that's not exactly it. It would be if we had a think voice there. Okay, the I can is more, I know I can. Okay, I know I can. Or I can't. It's certain or uncertain. Notice the keynotes. Normally we would think of certainty coming out of the Ajna, but this is part of the individual process. You know or you don't know. This voice can be so powerful. When you're hearing me speak with this voice, it's not just that channel. It's also my Saturns here, lending weight and seriousness to this voice. This voice is powerful, whether or not you've got Saturns there. This voice is a powerful voice of the individual. It's dynamic in that the 23 will say, I know, but it doesn't mean that they can actually do. This one indirectly can actually funnel or channel energy through it, right? There's no energy process up here, none whatsoever. But down here with the 8, it says I can. Now, it's not necessarily always going to mean that it can. But when it says that I can, you can hear when I'm being certain or uncertain about whether or not I can. So I know I can teach this class, but not with the lights on because my head hurts, you know? When it says I can and the quality is uncertain, I know I can. I know I can. See how it just doesn't land so well? Everybody knows when you hear uncertainty coming out of Lavina's mouth, you can hear it, you can feel it. Yeah, it's present. Make a unique contribution. Exactly. I can make a unique contribution. Individual contribution. I contribute is another way we can say I can, because that is the gate of contribution. I contribute by holding the group together towards group goals. My life's work and how I teach you. So from the perspective of Scarlett Johansson, this is her chart, she says, I like taking parts where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this exactly, but I know I can do it. As opposed to doing something where you go, there's nothing I can contribute to this. Boom. Yeah, I love her. So she has the basic worth realized in contributing individual efforts towards group goals. 4th line, respect. Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world in 2021. Amazing what these famous people can do. Okay, here we are switching gears over back into the logic. And this is part of the logical process is I lead, or I don't lead. Now, how often do you really say I lead? But another word you can use here, of course, is it's influential. This is especially true if you've got a 4th line. We know that that kind of rhymes with perspective of 4 is influence. Yeah. So this is about the alpha as a channel, the voice of authority, or even on the flip side, powerlessness. Why are they powerless? Because from the perspective of if they have not been elected to lead, this is collective, they don't necessarily have the power in place. Okay, why would you want to follow a leader who has a powerless voice? But there's always this vacillation back and forth. You lead when you have the authority, when you have the logic, when you have the plan, you're putting it into action or not. So these people who dream of being leaders and then nobody votes for them, maybe they declare their candidacy, but nobody votes for them. They don't have power. They're powerless. So when we think of a leader, we want somebody who has power in their voice. We want to know that they're in charge. We want to know that they'll rise to the occasion, that they'll take action, or they'll at least be able to direct action. That's why we have this leadership voice. So here is Patricia Smith, an American singer, songwriter, poet. She says, where does it all lead? What will become of us? These were our young questions, and young answers were revealed. It leads to each other. We become ourselves. And look, basic split leads to each other. The law of friction, whether active or passive, that endangers transference and thus influence. She's got both her Saturns here. Saturn, seriousness, 6th line, application, wisdom in her older years. Okay. Now we're going to look at the last individual gate. I am now. I am now. I am now. However it is that you choose to say this word, I am, or phrase, I am, it's about now, what you are, that moment. So again, look at individuality. This individual process has the most activations, 4 different potential expressions in the throat. So we see here we have the process of mental, emotional, identity, and now what? Wait, what? There's a lot. There's a lot going on here. What is this? Let's go see. Okay, for this particular example, because it's a complex gate, we're going to take this one at a time. This one you can see, I've got Elon Musk's chart. So from the perspective of our new era and age, this is a critical key aspect of what we're all being imprinted by. This I am existentially here now. So it's dependent on integration because it's an expression of integration. Okay, in order to establish its nowness, Elon has to be in response. Otherwise, he won't be empowered. So this existential I am now voice is decisive or it's indecisive. You hear that? You hear that echo of the, you could say, wishy-washiness of the 55? He loves me not. Passionate about him. I don't know. Eternal indecisiveness, eternal indecisive love. There it is, indecisive. Okay, individuality, it's indecisive. Why? Because we don't know until we know. It's there or it's not, the pulse of energy. So this existential voice, the only voice that truly expresses the individual process of really being in the pulse of now, because it has power potentially. This 20 can only be decisive if it knows. It can't be decisive. If it doesn't know, it's going to be indecisive. So you can feel that response in your body. If you're sitting next to somebody who has a response, try it and see. You'll feel it. When they have a response, they jump off the couch. So the knowing has to be there in the moment. This decisiveness comes from mutation. This is another very mutative gate. So the potential for the expression of now, remember, if it's got power to the throat, technically it's manifested. However, because this is the sacral and the sacral creates a totally different auric frequency, we're looking at somebody who needs to be in response. So their indecisiveness is a theme of individual knowing or not. Knowing is not a pattern. It's not a process. It's not collective. It's not tribal. It's there or not. Knowing here is spontaneous as an action of this I am in action. That's what's going on right here. Okay? Let me see what the chat is saying. You have 3 of those I know, and the electromagnetic to the 4th through inconsistent definition. Okay, here's the channel of charisma. A design where awareness, back in the day, Ra would say thoughts must become deeds. The awareness that Ra is talking about is the 4323, because that is the primary advisory strength that a projector can literally genetically connect up with these 3420s, because they're very, very close genetically speaking. Okay, design where response becomes deed. The awareness is what is guiding that response up here when it's in 2 different people. Elon says, when I was in college, I wanted to be involved in things that would change the world. Now I am. Work, Saturn, brings us discipline for work. So Saturn in the second line, the dogmatist. And then we have his Neptunes in machismo and the bully in his response there. I don't think he needs an introduction. We all know who Elon Musk is, yeah? Okay. What is a really nice change? We'll do one more gate and then real brief questions. We'll pause for more questions until Wednesday. Yeah. Okay, so here's an example. How can we keynote all of this together? The insisting, decisive, certain, caution in dealing with another. To desist in your uncertainty, to abandon in indecisiveness. All of that is correct. You can keynote weave these words now to add on another layer of what you're looking at when you're working with people's charts, because this is the frequency. Individuality, we're going to continue this conversation next week, because what I have planned for you is the voices of the gates of melancholy. Yeah, melancholy. the quality of the voice that expresses individuality, oftentimes it's melancholic, sadness, not in a bad way, mutative, this ability to know or not, this ability to caution or not, this ability to be certain or decisive or not. So we all have voices, and if you have nothing with respect to a planetary activation, you still have those voices. You just have them in receptivity. Of course, you can borrow any voice, but silence is more of your natural state of being. Okay? When you're looking at individuals who are not properly integrated or are not properly empowered, when you don't have an empowered voice, oh boy, is it sad. We're going to talk about that more next week. It can be empty, this emptiness, this indecisiveness, this uncertainty, abandon, desist. It's almost like the withdrawal of the pulse. Okay, so we have our last logical process gate. And when you look at the splenic side of the 16 here, we're looking at approval. I approve this message, or disapproval. Incredible critics. Don't take it personally. It's collective. It's collective. It's not personal. Anything that's collective is not personal. We say, I experiment here, or I'm enthusiastic. I have enthusiasm, the skillful language gate. Okay, the skillful language gate right here. That can be cynical or not, can approve or not. So you see this quality of the voice here speaks to the talent of this individual to share their logic. The importance of the logical process in our lives. We see we have lots and lots and lots of logic. It's the step-by-step process. It's the pattern. Now, if you have this, you can either express it in an uncomfortable way, or it can be received in an uncomfortable way. Why? Because nobody wants to be disapproved of. It reminds them of their parents when they approved or disapproved, whatever it is that we did. So it can feel uncomfortable. The voice of approval, however, good job. You did such a great job on your keynoting homework. You know, stamp of approval. I approve this. Wonderful job. Oh, that can feel really, really wonderful, can't it? Make you feel safe, make you feel healthy. Yeah, we're always looking for approval. Who are we looking for it from? Usually our elders, or somebody who maybe is further along the path of where we're going, that we would like to go. So this gate is a skill gate. It's skilled in expressing the talent of language from pattern recognition. Yeah, what's tasteful? Do you remember the stream? What's tasteful in the logical process of putting together our keynoting word formulas? What feels right to us, and not emotional feel, but felt sense in the body? The recognition capacity. Recognition is a great word for splenic, right? So the skill that's inherent with the expression of our sharing of our voice, there's power in it, this voice. Especially that we see here, we have energy indirectly to throat. So it's the mirror to the human experiential stream. 35 and 16 mirrors to each other. Remember, this over here was encouraging. Oh, and approval is kind of encouraging too. So in challenging the patterns until they're really efficient. Yeah, they're really precise. They're really logical. They're really detailed, or whatever the case may be. So the source of this voice is going to be dependent on what is that planetary life aspect that that person has. If this person, they're not a group person, and they say, I don't like that group, they're going to say it with a deep disapproval in their voice. And that's powerful from the perspective of being critical. What are critics there for? To improve on things. Here's Benjamin Affleck's design. So he says, I try new things and I give myself permission to fail and experiment. Yay! Because the only way that you can get, only that way can you get really successful. Try, experiment. Because if you don't practice, you're not going to be able to get there. So you can see he's got his design of talent, unusual Uranus depth. 6th line is self-fulfillment. His Saturn, independence. Permission to fail, part of the process. Failure leads to success. There is no other way around it. If you are not courageous enough to fail, you're not going to get precise with your keynoting. And failure is the golden nugget of what works. It's true. So from the logical perspective, if we were to keynote everything together, reasonable, approving, authority, reasonable, approval, authority, approving, authority, or unreasonable, disapproving, and they're powerless in their shares. Those are all sharing collective. So when you're looking at logic, remember, some people have none of this. Some people have one. Some people have aspects pointing at that gate, so we know that there's going to be a lot of pressure on it. So as an example, Ra just has 1, but he also had the 48 and I believe the 7, if I'm remembering correctly. So then these 2 voices had pressure from his own design. Okay. He has just 1, genetically speaking, he was reasonable or unreasonable. But he wasn't an approval, disapproval person, not genetically speaking, from the natal imprint. And he didn't have the authority or powerlessness from the throat. Remember, when you're keynoting the fullest experience of a human design, I can remember people saying, wanting to know tell me all the things. I'm like, what brings you here today if I'm doing a coaching session? I want to know all the things. I would be like, do you have a couple weeks? Because it takes some time. Now you know why it takes some time. Yeah. What people tend to do is they speak from their conditioning rather than from their authenticity. So from the perspective of these throat gates, when you have a genetic aspect, a life process, okay, your life process, that's what you want to keynote at. Okay, what is it that's unique to them? Openness is not unique. Openness is conditioning. Anything that's white, it's conditioning. So from the perspective of what you're attempting to do here is do your best to keynote weave what's happening in that person's design. So from the perspective of what is actually speaking here, somebody give me written, you don't have to be put on the spot. But what is a keynote for Earth? What is a keynote for Moon? What is a keynote for Jupiter? That's how you keynote that channel in relational context to contributing to hold the group together towards the group goals. What's most important for this group to know now? We all are what we are. We can only give what we are. You know that thing people say, oh, they're just doing their best. It's kind of like this. We're just doing our design when we're coming from an authentic place. Thanks, everyone. Bye.